Hello, I'm Donna Scale, along with Tiffany Ross. Welcome to A Time to Dream. Time to Dream is brought to you by Roaring Lambs Ministries, and we want to help you effectively tell your story of what God has done in your life. That's what our ministry is all about, and today on A Time to Dream, you're going to hear what God has done in the life of Judi Thompson. So let me ask you a question. Do you believe in miracles? You know, I bet there's been times in your life where you've wondered how something could happen, and it was God behind it. And Judi has seen a lot of those moments in her life where it had to be God that would cause it all to come about like that. And God wants to reveal himself to you in a very real and powerful way. So let me tell you a little bit about Judi. Judi was born and raised in Des Moines, Iowa, but she spent most of her life in California. As a child and a young adult, she studied music, which has been the heartbeat of her life. Throughout her life, Judi has taught music to hundreds of elementary, middle school, and high school students, as well as serving in various church music ministries, and she continues to do so even today. Judi and her husband Ralph live in Castro Valley, California, where together the blended family has 5 children and 8 grandchildren. And one of her children is very special to me because it's my dear friend and co-host Tiffany Ross. So this is Tiffany's mom who's here with us today, and we're so glad to have you on our show, Judi. I actually got to interview Tiffany when she first came aboard A Time to Dream, and she talked about her mom a little bit, so you may know a little bit about how important Judi is to Tiffany. But now we're going to hear all about Judi's life and what God has done in her life. So, Judi, we always like to start at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing, would you please?
I would. It's my delight to be with you, Donna.
Thank you.
And to see my daughter on this program. It has just been a real thrill for me. Yes, I often say that I grew up in the geriatric ward. Because my father was older when he married my mother, and after 3 months of marriage, he being 58 and my mother being 38, they invited my mother's mother, my grandmother, to live with them. After 3 months of marriage, you can imagine that. That was either bravery or something on his part. But my life was wonderfully blessed with these older people. And of course, as a youngster, I didn't have a full appreciation for that. My mother was filled with faith. She loved the Lord with her whole heart, and she also was very courageous. She was convinced that God wanted her to be married. She was convinced that God wanted her to have a child, a baby girl. That's what she said.
Be specific.
But I'll tell you what, they were married, and my dad was 60 years old when I was born. I had no idea after all that long bachelorhood if he thought he was going to have a baby. I don't know if they had to give him smelling salts to wake him up or what. But anyway, there she was, pregnant and delighted. She went to the doctor to confirm that, and the doctor said, well, you are pregnant, but you won't go home tonight. We're putting you in the hospital, and we're going to abort this baby because you're filled with fibroid tumors. The baby certainly couldn't survive, and you will die trying to have this baby. My mother said, you know, I wasn't haughty about it, but I looked at the doctor and I said, well, doctor, because she was convinced the Lord had promised this to her, I'll have this baby or die. And she went to an osteopath who was a Christian, and he said, well, if you'll agree to have a cesarean section, I'll take your case. And so they said, she said, of course. And I was born, I was an 8-month baby, which for all my non-punctual times that I've had in my life, I always say, well, I came a month early. What do you want? But that was the kind of faith that I grew up witnessing. It was always, if anything came up, it was, let's pray.
How wonderful.
It was wonderful. And her mother was there, pray with us. And my father prayed in his own way. He was just a little bit more reserved. But I had no doubt that I was in a Christian home for sure.
And Mom, you know, I knew Grandma Nona, my mom's mom, and what a powerhouse woman. She was funny, she was full of faith. She lived with us for a time. It was fantastic, a great cook. But I never got to meet your dad, Burton. And the stories you tell me of him are so wonderful. He was a very intelligent, educated man, reserved. He was frugal. He had a dry sense of humor, which I know you get from him. But you had so much time with him growing up. He was with you throughout the day because he was retired. And yet you lost him early in life. Would you share with us about that?
Yes, my mother was busy about taking care of my grandmother. My grandmother had a cowbell, but she didn't care about ringing the cowbell necessarily and holding it by the handle, like you would ring a cowbell. But if she needed something, she rang the cowbell, but she held it by the side. And so we would hear, My mom would say, oh, go see what Grandma wants. Then it was usually, where's your mother? My father then, my mother, taken up with all the cares of our family, and I had an uncle that lived with us also. My dad was wonderful to bring in people there like that. And so she was taking care of Grandma. And so Dad had me all day long through all of my preschool years, a father to run to. He would take me in the afternoons to an amusement park. I was afraid, I remember when I was afraid to get on one of the horses, so he just rode with me on one of the seats that were in the merry-go-round. He taught me a little song, swinging in the grapevine swing, laughing where the wildwood sing, and then he decided to take me to the art museum in Des Moines and go behind where they had a lot of grape leaves and grape vines, and let me swing on the grapevine swing, and he would sing that song. He had a wonderful heritage himself. He was from Kansas. He kind of broke away from his family and lived in Iowa. So I had him until I was 12 years old. He had been diagnosed with cancer 7 years before that. And he didn't want anyone to know, including my mother. One day, a doctor came to examine him, and my mother said, how's he doing? And he said, well, considering what he has. She said, what do you mean what he has? Hasn't he told you? He has cancer. So she says, she came in and she saw him, and he looked at her and he said, oh, he told you, didn't he? She said, yes, he did. Now, what about Judith? I don't want her to know. I want to interact with her just the way she is. I don't want her to be treating me out of pity or something. So needless to say, it was a great big shock when she came in one day and said, honey, Daddy died last night. I ran out of the house screaming. I apologize.
That's okay. It's so traumatic when you lose a parent at an early age like that.
It is. And being as close. Most girls aren't that close to their fathers, let's face it.
Right.
Their dads are usually at work. And
Or uninvolved.
Exactly.
Right.
And so it was an amazing, but she wanted to be faithful to what he wanted. And I would say, and this was just right at the time, I was 12 years old. Okay, so this is right in my middle school experience. From that point on, during those years, nothing was funny. Kids at school were laughing and joking, and nothing was funny to me. I had one respite, and that is that they had given me lessons. Even my father took me to Drake University to get lessons for me when I was 4 years old.
Piano.
Piano lessons. But then, of course, when it came time for the recital, I wasn't going to do it, and I'm telling him I wasn't going to do it. You need to know there's that rebellious side of me. And God had to deal with the rebellious side. Any of you out there that know that you kind of have a rebellious heart? We all do. We all do. But anyway, he actually dragged me up the stairs. You will play for Mrs. Green. I can still remember. I was in my little Mary Jane shoes, but you know, the time I got to the top of the stairs where Mother was waiting, my socks were all dirty from where he had dragged me up the steps, because there was going to be no way that I wasn't going to obey him. And that's one thing I want to say. I have an appreciation for someone who was 64 years old who would take the energy and discipline me. That made a big difference in my life. So I think that losing him at that age gave me just a connection with that period of time in my life when I just kind of lost those years. And the Lord gave me an amazing love for middle school age kids.
That's sweet. Well, and not only was it traumatic for you, but it was traumatic for your mom as well. And it wasn't long after that she lost her mom.
That's right.
That you were both caring for. So I can understand why you'd want to kind of pick up and make new roots somewhere. So you moved from Iowa to California. And tell us a little bit about that point in your life.
Well, we had pastors in the church in Des Moines who had been reassigned to San Jose, California. And of course, well, I shouldn't say of course, but the lady was the person who led me to Jesus. With a flannel graph lesson, along with my best friend, we accepted the Lord. And on a Sunday morning, and it was a wonderful experience, and it gave me a really close relationship with that lady. And so now she and her husband have now moved to California, and they wrote to us and said, after about a year, would you like to come and visit us in California? Well, of course we would. So we went. And one thing you need to know about my mother, she was, I don't even like the word obese, but she was just, my father described her to his parents, chubby and cheerful. Okay, you'll love Nona, she's chubby and cheerful. So, my mother suffered with the heat in Iowa, especially the humidity, as did my grandmother. So we came to California, and I can remember my mother saying, Judy, they have blankets on the bed. It's Jew. Well, they deliberately left, I don't know, for all of you who live in California, or know of California, this was Northern California, and they left the window open on purpose that night, and I woke up to my mother saying, oh, it's cold in here, oh my word. The next day, she asked the lady, does it cool off like this in the summer? Most all the time, she goes, yes it does. And she turned right to me and she said, do you want to move to California, Judy? Of course, swimming pools, movie stars,
Yeah,
right?
right.
I
Yeah.
said, yeah. And we did. She picked up everything from there, sold the house, left all of her relatives back there, and we came to California.
And so there you were, new in California,
Yes.
and it wasn't too long after that you met a man that I resemble.
Exactly right. I met your father. Now I have to say that even before we came on that trip, I had heard of him. Okay. And I had heard that he was a son of ministers. And I hadn't heard that he sang, which, my dear, you've gotten all the strength in your voice from him. Absolutely, God gave that to you from him. And so we went to the church, and there he was. Well, I kind of had prepared in my mind, this is going to be Mr. Wonderful before I even met him. I mean, how many of you know like that, you know? This is the fantasy of a teenager, right? He just fills the bill. He's the pastor's son. He was the president of the youth group. He was 2 years older than I was. And I was a junior in high school, and he had just graduated high school, and he was in his first year of college. And so there we were. We started dating because he sang and I could accompany him on the piano. Well, how perfect is that? That just seemed like God going right down the checklist. You know, just everything seems wonderful.
But it didn't work out that way. Sometimes things look so good on the outside, but not always good on the inside. And I know your marriage might have started off kind of perfect, like you say, but things start to change, didn't they?
Yes, I have to bring in one aspect that I really need to say. And that is, sometimes when we won't listen to people close around us because they know too much about us and we just don't want to accept those things. Like I say, I had this rebellious streak in me. I was a good student. I must say that in Iowa, I went to school with many Jewish kids and they always raised the curve. And in whatever class I had, I would go in the class and go, oh no, tell me he's in this class too. But my mother was always connecting with people who heard from the Lord. She was not interested in fluffy prayers and whatever. She wanted people who were intense with the Lord. And she had a dear friend named Hannah. And it is true that I was dating Dan. We dated 4 years. We had one breakup in there. And I was getting ready to marry him, and my mother had a call from her friend Hannah. And the call, she actually kept what Hannah told her to herself for a week. And then I think she thought, knowing the track record of this woman with the Lord, I better just share with you. And this is what she said. Oh, honey, Hannah called. And my response was, oh yeah? And what did she want? Okay. Which meant I felt like it was going to automatically be some kind of a negative. Mm-hmm. She said, well, she didn't know this man that you're going to marry, but God has shown her in a dream that he will not be faithful to you. And I said, may God forgive me, that old bat, what does she know? We're in love with each other. He loves the Lord, I love the Lord, and how, Mom. She said, I just thought I should tell you. All right, we got married, and I was in college for 2 years, and was starting my 5th semester, and I became pregnant. And it wasn't possible for me to do what I needed to do at school and be pregnant. I was so sick. So even though I regretted not being able to finish right then, don't worry, I was, don't worry, you'll finish, okay. And I was going to be a music educator. It's always been in my heart to do that. When my son, and we had a son named Tim, Tiffany's older brother, when he was 9 months old, my husband then, Dan, said, well, I have something I guess I better confess to you. I asked a girl at work out. Now, he was very frugal too. And we had a social budget every month of $5, okay? I said, you asked her out to do what? Oh, I don't know, maybe dinner and a movie? I said, dinner and a movie? Well, we never go and have dinner and a movie. I know, but don't worry about it. She turned me down. Okay, what do you think I thought of? He will not be faithful to her. That came to my mind. Now, Dr. Laura Schlesinger would probably say, so you went ahead and had 2 more children with him? Yeah. Oh, yes, I did. I forgave him. We were fine, and we loved each other. I'm telling you, Tiffany, don't ever doubt that. We had a true love. He had a lot of hurts, because unfortunately, he grew up in a home where one thing was preached on Sunday and another thing was lived at home. He was an only child, and let me just say this. For all of you only children out there, it's a rough life sometimes. It's a lonely life, and you develop an imagination. You kind of live wherever you can live at the time to be comfortable. He was an only child. I felt accepted by my family. In his family, as his parents moved from church to church, he never knew they were even moving until he heard it announced from the pulpit on Sunday morning. Now, how unaccepted would you feel? Mm-hmm. And so he had a lot of this, all, as we say, stuffed out, right? Well, that came out in anger. He gradually got a little bit more angry, a little bit more angry. At one point, he felt God was calling us into the ministry, and then he said, nope, I'm gonna go sign up for law enforcement. So that was really, we had another child, we had a daughter, Tammy. Everything's fine, she was his favorite of all the kids. And things were fine. I'll just give you a little personal detail. He decided, that's it, no more children, that's it, I'm having a vasectomy. So he had a vasectomy. Do you know that God has a sense of humor? When we decide that we're gonna control everything, he said, don't think so. And guess what? I got pregnant, and this was the child, Tiffany. He immediately just became so angry. Well, we can't afford this child, and so you will have an abortion. That's all there is to it, Judy. I couldn't believe he was saying that. That's against everything we believe. How in the world? I won't have an abortion. Yes, you will. You promised to love, honor, and obey me. And I will tell you, he would doubt it, I'm the head of this household. I never doubted that he was the head of the household. The Lord had to be in there somewhere, right? But this was, you promised to love, honor, and obey me, and I'm telling you to do this. Well, I knew I couldn't do that. It escalated to the point of, well, you do have a choice then. Either you abort this child, or I'm leaving the family. The phrase was not going then, but the appropriate phrase would have been, don't let the door hit you. Because I said, I will go back and we will live with my mother in Iowa. But no one who really loves me could be making this demand for me. So that wasn't exactly the ideal marriage that I was hoping for. Not only that, but I have 3 children. And now how in the world am I going to support them? Because I didn't follow up with school. We started a family. And now what will I do? But God was there.
Yes.
God was there.
Yes.
I'm so glad you made the right decision, because your daughter is so special to me, and I couldn't imagine you being faced with that kind of decision.
Thank you. Even my dear mother, who faced that with a medical proclamation, you won't live,
Right.
Right.
She called me and she said, honey, I won't tell you what to do, but just remember what the doctor wanted me to do with you.
That's right.
Right.
And I thought, you had every medical reason. The doctors are the gods, right? They
Right.
tell you you're not gonna live.
Right.
You're gonna do what they say.
Yeah.
She chose to do what God said.
Yeah.
And so, I'm so glad I did too. And it had to be the Lord that gave me that kind of strength.
And courage.
And then, Mom, I love the next bit of your story because it speaks to me, and I know there are many out there, maybe you don't have your degree, or you don't feel qualified, or whatever that God is leading you to. I'm here to tell you, He will open doors that you never dreamed He would open. Would you share with us the interview that you had with a lady at a Christian school right about this
I
time?
will, because my whole life as a youngster, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to teach music. And it was like this was burning inside me. My father said, well, she wants to be a teacher, and he, being so frugal though, he bought a big blackboard and put it on the wall and got me the best chalk in the world.
Right.
And so that I came home every day and I had my class there,
Yes.
And I would bring kids home from school, wanted to play games and whatever. I said, no, we're gonna play school. School!
Yeah. Right.
But yes, I had this call. I'm going, I don't know kids. So I spoke with my dear son, who was like an adult. He took on so many responsibilities when my husband left. Don't know what I'm gonna do, but I know that God is gonna provide for us. God is gonna provide for us. Have a call. Judy, this is Mrs. Root from the middle school, Valley Christian, actually junior high school. And I called because I wondered if you would consider coming and teaching for us. And I said, oh, Mrs. Root, I would love to do that, but she says, well, it's a choir class, it's a string ensemble class, and it is a handbell class. I said, well, I would just love to do it, but I don't have my degree, and I certainly don't have a credential with it. She said, oh, well, I didn't ask you if you had a degree or credential. I just asked you if you'd be willing to come and teach for us. I said, well, of course I would. And that's how I began.
Yeah.
My first practice teaching class was 72 junior hires
Wow.
in a cafeteria, crammed on the stage with kids that were on detention back behind making faces and whatever they were doing, and I'm trying to teach the class. I can't see what they're doing, but the
Right.
kids can.
Sure.
And God used that woman in my life to launch what I thought was never going to be possible.
Yes. Right.
So in the midst of the turmoil, here's God's miracle.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that God knows the desires of your heart. He really knew what you wanted to do, to teach music. And he made possible what you thought was impossible.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and so that's an awesome story, and probably the story that I heard you share this weekend that really touched me was a story about forgiveness. I mean, you have learned lesson after lesson in all these different times in your life, but as you mentioned, your husband, Dan, left the family for another woman, and please share with us how the Lord moved in your heart.
I will. You know, he makes the best out of everything. So we make a mistake, but he has a plan. He has a plan. He had a plan for my son. My mother, when we came to California, she connected with more people that heard the voice of the Lord. And when my son was just a little baby, one of her dear prayer partner friends came and held him and just prophesied over him and said, this child will be the healer of the breach. And my mother said, that's strange, isn't it? I'll tell you more about that later. Yes, in fact, my husband did leave, and he went to live with a lady, I'm going to call her a lady, named Mary. She worked at the hospital, and he did hospital guarding there, and they just got pretty chummy, and so he decided to move in with Mary. At the same time said, well, you and the kids, I guess, are just going to be out in the streets because we're going to sell this house and you can have half the money, and I don't know what you're going to do. I'm moving in with Mary. And then he came back, Donna, about a week and a half, and he said, well, Mary said if I put you guys out, I'm not welcome to live with her. Now this is the other woman. What other woman do you know doesn't want to just take the money and cut and run?
Right.
But that wasn't Mary.
Right.
We were still married, but he was living with Mary. Now, how's that? I figured, well, I made the commitment to the Lord. I'm not going to file for divorce ever. This was my commitment to the Lord. So Mary, he lived with. And then, as we know what always happened, they couldn't really trust each other.
Yeah.
After 4 years of that, he just pulled up stakes and moved out from Mary. And of course, I didn't have the most loving feelings toward Mary because I felt that she dragged him, out of the family. Look, it was his choice to leave the family. It was his choice to get involved. And I'm not going to put that totally off on Mary. But he came to say goodbye to everybody because he was moving to, of all places, Texas. Okay? And Waco, Texas, and he found another little chick. Her name, I think, was Donna, of all things.
Wasn't me, wasn't me.
That's right. But after that, he said, no, you'll probably have a call from Mary. Well, he was exactly right. At 2 a.m, I had a call from Mary. And she's saying, Judy, I know you know who I am. And I know you know where he is, and I have to know where he is. I can't sleep, I can't eat, please. I said, you know what, Mary? It was right about Thanksgiving time. And I said, well, I'll come over and see you tomorrow, Mary, because I knew roughly where she lived. And she said, well, okay. And so I stopped, I remember, and got a pumpkin pie. And all the way over to her house, I'm saying to myself, how could she? This woman. Okay. Until I parked the car, got out of the car, and went up and knocked on the door. And here came this woman. Now you can see me, okay? She is tall, braless, long red hair, cowboy boots, okay. And she's just what Dan ordered, I guess, at that point. But she invited me to come in, and I will tell you, the minute I stepped over that threshold, I had such love come over me for her because I saw how desperate she was. And I knew that we'd been saddened by his leaving, but we weren't desperate because we had Jesus. And I sat down and she said, tell me where he is. I said, you know, Mary, I can't tell you because I really honestly don't know where he is. But I want to tell you something. We were so saddened when he left, but we weren't desperate like you are. And it's because we have Jesus. And I want to tell you, I love you, Mary. She said, oh, how can you say that? You've been living with my husband. I said, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. Well, a lot happened with Mary after that. She invited me to play for her daughter's wedding. She invited me to give piano lessons to her son, who then went to San Jose State and found a teacher who had actually retired, and he became a concert pianist.
And the Lord continued to move like that in your life. And it's no credence to you, but I will say, Mom, that you experience so many miracles because you live a surrendered life. You have said, Lord, through all the pain, through all the heartache, through all of the questions and wondering and disbelief and doubt, I give myself to you. Use me. And he has definitely used you. And I'm so grateful for that because that was an example to me growing up, you know, just your life. And I've told Donna, I love to tell people about the miracles that I experienced growing up because there were many times there wasn't enough money in the bank. We didn't know how we were going to make it. And I know time is clipping away. Would you share with our listeners, whichever story comes to mind, of God's miraculous provision for our family?
Well, there were many, and as we know, so many things happen, and angels are protecting us and watching over us, and things happen miraculously that we're not even aware of. And people don't think back now because we have all the technology, we have cell phones, we have smartphones, we have every way to contact everybody at any time. These were in the olden days when we didn't have cell phones. And Tiffany's older brother, Tim, was marrying the love of his life, Laura. And we were the family of the groom, and we were providing the rehearsal dinner. And we had taken a bunch of things over to this clubhouse where we were going to have that dinner. And on the way back home, driving, our car started making this thud under the roof.
Tammy and I were in the back seat.
Yes. And so I just pulled up over the curb on a little grassy area there, and I think it was Tammy saying, well, what are we doing? And I said, we're gonna do the only thing I know to do. The Lord says to call him in a time of trouble, and this is trouble. I can't drive this car any further. So we took hands, I don't think you rolled your eyes, like not again.
Yeah, right.
But I'm praying and I'm telling the Lord I can't go another inch in this car. Lord, you know, we need your help. And I hadn't finished the prayer yet till there was a knock on my window over here. And we looked and we saw this man. And I rolled the window down a little bit. He said, may I help you? I said, oh, you're just the answer to our prayer. I said, yes, this car's making a terrible noise and I can't go another inch in this car. He said, well, why don't you pop the hood? Okay, so I did. And I got out, and of course the girls were like, their mother's getting out with this strange man, right? And we put the hood up.
And it was dark and there was no one around.
It was dark. There was absolutely, this was a road that was filled with cars, an expressway, all hours of the day and night, and there was nobody. No car, no truck, no nothing. And so I stood with him there, and he kind of did this, And he turned to me and he said, it'll be fine, it'll be safe to drive home now. And I said, oh, are you sure? He said, yes. So we went to put the hood on, and we did, and I turned around, of course, to thank him, and he was nowhere to be seen. There was nobody. Now, I will tell you, Tiffany or her sister Tammy are into substantiating their mother's fantasies. They saw him, friends, God sent an angel.
Yes.
Not just for the car, but to prove to these girls that he is a miracle working God.
Yes.
Yes.
And to me.
Right.
Well, Judy, I had the same type of story.
No.
We were driving back from our friend's house to the airport, pouring rain. And I remember the windshield wipers were going so fast we could hardly see, and very stressful, white knuckle driving. And so my husband pulled over to the side of the road, but he pulled over so far that the two tires on the right-hand side got stuck in mud. And so the more he tried to get out of that mud, the more, his tires would spin and the deeper he'd get. And we didn't know what we were going to do. We were so afraid we were going to miss the plane. If we missed the plane, there's not another flight that night. We didn't have the money really to stay over another night in a hotel, and we just didn't know what to do. And this was a road where there was a median down the middle of the road. So there were 2 lanes going one way, 2 lanes going the other. And we look up and somebody pulls over in the other lane, crosses the highway in the pouring rain, comes over to us, asks us what happened. We told him what happened, goes to the front of the car, and if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. First he went and got a 2x4 that just happened to be in his trunk, in the back part of his truck actually. Brings the 2x4 over across 4 lanes of highway, pouring rain. Then he lays it down and he physically lifts up the front of our car and places it on the 2x4.
No.
If I hadn't been there, I'd never believe it. And we were just stunned. And the guy actually tells Anton that he just had open heart surgery. So, I don't know, go figure. How does a man who has open heart surgery lift up the front end of a car, places it on a 2x4, and then he's walking away, and Anton said, wait a minute, come back. He was going to give him some money, do something. He said, what's your name? And the man said, just call me JC. And then we looked up, and he was gone. The truck was gone. We don't know how that all happened, but just like you, God is an ever-present help in time of trouble.
Amen.
You have to believe in Him.
Yes.
You have to receive His Son, Jesus Christ, as your Lord and Savior. You have to call out to Him, and you have to trust that He's going to answer your prayer. And so, I believe in miracles like
Amen.
you, and, we're not here to tell you amazing stories. We're just here to tell you that Jesus is real and God is real, and He does want to answer your prayers. And so I know there's one more story that we really want to hear, and that is about a very amazing, intimidating job interview that you had. Tell us about how the Lord used a very creative teaching method to win your boss over.
Well, I was teaching at a school in California. And up to that point in time, we had used, in other schools, I had used conventional materials. But the Lord gave me this idea about a teaching method. And so I felt this was a new opportunity for me to introduce this. And I was teaching with a wonderful man who had his doctorate in violin performance. And he asked me, so what method would we be using? And I said, well, I'd like to use my method. And he said, what would that be? I said, well, we go in and we size up the class, the needs, and about where they probably are musically, and then the Lord will give me a lesson plan, and bring the music and print it out.
Can I interject though?
Yes.
He was very wary of hiring you even because of your lack of credentials.
Exactly,
Right.
of course,
Right.
as anybody in
Right.
the natural would be.
Right.
I don't blame him at all.
Right.
And so he did not, like I said, roll his eyes, but he was eager to see how soon this was gonna collapse, I'm sure, never said that. Well, God used it, and not only did he hire me, but he has encouraged me to actually publish this method because it works. But there's another reason because it works, because in the process of having it work, the music can be introduced and I can give lyrics out that go with the music. And in a Christian school environment, it's wonderful for the kids to be learning to play Christian music and have instant success, and they do have instant success. And so I'm just grateful to the Lord for giving. He's the one who dropped that into my mind. And I'm so thankful for a superintendent who would be willing to try it out.
Great.
Well, and Donna, I can promise you, I know I'm biased, but to hear some of her beginning strings and, middle, advanced strings, they do sound like a chamber orchestra. I told her middle school group, I said, you could hire them out for weddings, they're so good. And so this method is completely God-given, and I look forward to you getting that out because I know many would benefit from it. So one other little thing I want to say that is so cool about your commute, for years, you commuted over this bridge from Castro Valley to San Bruno, daily commute, and only my mother would develop a relationship with the toll booth attendants. And there was one gentleman in particular, and I've been on the phone with her when she's gone through the toll booth and spoken with him. Just share how God even developed that relationship.
Yes, I just knew, and I've become aware, Donna, in my later years here, that it is really true that the eyes are the window of the soul.
Yes.
And I have walked up, I was going to be on a jury, and I was waiting out in the hallway, and this lady turned and looked at me and smiled, and I thought, well, she knows the Lord, so I just went and asked her. I said, well, so you're a believer? She goes, well, yes, I am. It is the truth. The eyes are the window of the soul. And so I came through this toll booth, and we usually, in California there, we have a lot of Muslims, and we usually hear, that's the kind of music you hear when you come through. I came through, and I heard, and Jesus Christ is Lord of all, and blah, 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 whatever, I can't remember exactly what all was being said, but I knew right then and there. And I looked at him, and I said, well, praise God. He goes, amen, hallelujah, sister. But then he would say, pray for my daughter. She's really away from the Lord.
And you don't have much time with them.
No,
you've got to get moving because people are behind you.
Oh yeah, people are behind us honking.
But God would stretch out that time with him,
It's
and you
true.
could pray for his daughter, and she's doing better now, right?
I believe, I can't give you an update for sure on that.
Okay.
Because we haven't had to pay tolls
For a while.
But
Yeah.
yes, if we're willing,
Yes.
God will give us the courage or whatever it needs in the moment.
Right.
And the opportunity.
And of course, the opportunity.
And the words to say, because he
words
knows
to say.
both sides. He knows what they need to hear. He funnels into your mind what to say, and you can minister to that person. And I know, Judy, you've done that all your life. And just listening to your story today is just so amazing of all the different times that God let you know what direction to take, what to say, how to love, how to forgive, how to be used by him. And so you have a very amazing story, and I know it really stems from your relationship with Jesus Christ when, as a young girl, you prayed to receive Christ. He came into your life, he made you a new creation, and then he opens up all these doors of opportunities. So in our final few minutes, do you have anything that you would like to leave the audience with? Any thoughts, anything specific or direct that you would like to look right into their eyes and say to them?
You know, I'm living proof of someone who does not deserve the grace of God that I've received. I'm here to tell you that no matter how rebellious you may have been in your past, or even right now, Jesus is waiting with open arms to not just receive you, but to enable you to do what He created you to do. He's waiting. He's not only willing, he's just waiting for you to decide, I guess I'm just going to bend my knee here and accept Jesus and go the right way. There's no way to describe, not just a feeling physically that will be a sensation to you that you'll have forever, but there will be a confidence that He is capable in whatever situation you find yourself, be it financial, physical, or whatever dilemma you find yourself in. You can always turn to Him, and He will never, ever fail. Never. I also want to say, if God sends somebody into your life whose spiritual track record you know, and they want to share something with you, don't turn it away. Take that to heart, because it could be God speaking to you.
And normally right now I would be closing out the show, but before I do that, I just want to ask you, Tiffany.
Yes.
This is your mom. She's our guest on our show today, but maybe you have some final words that you would like to add about.
Well, Donna, I'm glad that you asked me, that I get to share this, because Mom, first and foremost, thank you for having me, having the courage to have me. I know only the Lord gave you that strength, and He has blessed my life abundantly. I have life because of you, so thank you. And I just love you. I love you so much. And as we mentioned earlier, Mom and I got to be part of a retreat this weekend where we were involved in music together, and that's been my life. Because of the home that I grew up in and the example that my mother was, she fostered that worship in me, and that has been really my life's ministry. And I have her to thank, I have the Lord to thank for that. But for those of you watching right now who want that for your children, it's not too late. Maybe you've never chosen Jesus, or maybe you're so far from Him. You knew those stories as a child, but you didn't pass them down to your children or your grandchildren. It's not too late. Recommit today to making Jesus the Lord of your life. Speak of Him to your children and your grandchildren. There's no condemnation in Him. He wants to take you right where you are now and move forward. And you will all have eternity with Jesus. That's the best part. And so I always like to end our story with, there's some great news that you must know. And, you know, it was prophesied over my brother when he was 9 months old that he would be the healer of the breach. Now, mind you, my dad hadn't left our family yet, but that had been prophesied all those years before. Well, my dad moved to Texas. He met a wonderful Christian woman. They got married. He rededicated his life to Jesus. And my brother then set out to visit my dad and my grandfather, his father, so those 3 generations together. And my brother said, Dad, I want you to know we forgive you for everything. Tammy, Tiffany, and I, we don't hold any grudge against you. Jesus forgives you. We forgive you. We love you. Tim said he sobbed like a baby, and there was such release when he did that. So I want you to know there is hope for anyone. So yes, my dad had a moment of straying, a season of straying in his life, but God brought him back, and that can be the same for you.
Amen.
Oh, Mom, I love you, and I'm so grateful that you could come out to Texas. We were able to do, as Donna said, a wonderful retreat together, worshiping the Lord. So because of my mom, I've been involved in worship most of my life. And it's been a powerful thing, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that I wouldn't have life had it not been for her to have the courage to have me. And so for those of you who perhaps are faced with that same dilemma, I encourage you to choose life, and God will be with you. If you have Jesus in your life, he's not going to leave you in that situation abandoned and alone. He will help you. He'll bring people around you to help you. But there's that, but also for those of you who are parents and maybe you've not chosen Jesus, now's your time. They might be young, they might be old, but there's still an opportunity for you to impact your children's lives for Jesus, or your grandchildren's lives for Jesus. And God doesn't want you to sit in doom and gloom and condemnation. Oh, I would have, could have, should have. Now's your day. Now's the time to start that legacy so that the generations after you can walk in boldness and in faith, making a difference for Jesus and knowing him, and ultimately having eternal life. Don't you want that for all of your friends and family, to know that they'll be with Jesus in heaven forever? So that's what we want to express to you today. We're not a perfect family at all. We've made tons of mistakes, but Jesus is what covers us. Jesus is the answer.
And if you've never prayed to receive Christ as your Lord and Savior, you can do that right now. There are no magic words to say. Just tell God that you want to know him fully, that you recognize that he's missing in your life, and you want to give your life to him so that he can control your life. You recognize that you've made mistakes, and you recognize that God sent his only Son, Jesus Christ, to actually die on a cross, shed his blood for you, that his blood covers you as if you've never sinned. It makes you white as snow, the Bible says, and because of his blood, you can come into a right relationship with him in this life, and as Tiffany said, spend all eternity with him. Won't you do that right now? You've just listened to an amazing story of how real God is. Don't let another day go by. If you haven't made that call out to him, do it today. That's why we do A Time to Dream. And if you want to talk to us more about that, you call Tiffany or I at 972-380-0123. That's 972-380-0123. You can email us at atimetodream@gmail.com. And if you want to reach out to Judi, you can do that through us. Just email us at atimetodream@gmail.com and say you want to reach out to Judi, and we'll get you in touch with her as well. So for Donna Skell, myself, and Tiffany Ross, you've been listening to A Time to Dream. Have a great week. Keep dreaming, and may God richly bless you.